This is Eitan Weinstein.
And I'm Naor Menninger, and you're listening to Two Nice Jewish Boys.
A year ago, it felt like Israel was holding its breath. Hezbollah loomed in the north, Hamas continued to entrench itself in Gaza, and Assad's regime in Syria was as ruthless as ever. Iran, the puppet master of this whole scene, pulled the strings behind it all, funding and arming its proxies to encircle Israel. Fast forward to today, and the map looks vastly different. Gaza is in ruins, Assad is gone, and Hezbollah has taken a serious blow. Yet with every gain comes a new set of challenges. We're still at war on multiple fronts. The Houthis are firing missiles almost daily, and so many Israelis are still held captive in Gaza. In this episode, we're taking a hard look at where we stand today. Is Israel any closer to victory? Have we truly restored our deterrence, or is it hanging by a thread? Is there any end in sight to the ongoing front in Gaza? Can we hope for a hostage deal, or will negotiations stretch on indefinitely? What does the defeat of Assad mean for the region, and how is Iran adapting its strategy in response to these shifts? These are the big questions we'll try to tackle today as we assess whether Israel's position has genuinely improved, or if we're simply fighting a different version of the same battle. To help us navigate this intricate landscape, we're thrilled to welcome back Dr. Dan Shiftan. Dr. Dan, a leading authority on Israel's national security and Middle Eastern geopolitics, Dr. Shiftan has been a guest on the podcast many times before. He recently published his new book, The Rise and Fall of the Pan-Arab Struggle Against Israel, in Hebrew, hopefully soon to be out in English. With his keen insights and non-nonsense analysis, he's going to be the perfect person to help us break it all down. So let's get into it. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
So how should we start? What is it that we don't know about the war and about the situation in the Middle East?
The most important thing to understand about this war is that it is the first and so far the most important war of the 21st century. What we have in Ukraine is a 20th century war. Here we have something completely different, and it's a product of what we've seen at the end of the previous century and the beginning of this century, where the good guys got worse and the bad guys got better. The bad guys got weapons that only 10, 20, 30 years ago were the prerogatives of superpower. And now you can buy them in the supermarket, and every primitive bunch of tribes in Yemen can shoot ballistic missiles and can use accuracy, and God forbid, very soon, I'm afraid that we will have biological weapons because pathogens are very easy to produce at home. And we've had more advance in biotechnology than in any other field. So we're still, you ain't seen nothing yet, okay, there. And the problem is that this kind of challenge, even when your opponent is very weak and you are a power, even a superpower, you can't do what you used to do with terrorists, either ignore them or finish them off. You can't ignore them because the residual power that they will have, no matter how hard you hit them, can hurt you in the midst of your civilian population, your most vulnerable spots, and you can't completely destroy them because all you need is a very small number of things that can reach these targets, and you must respond to it. So the bad guys are much better off than before. And at the same time, the good guys have tied the second hand behind their back. Liberals always fight wars with one hand behind their back. This is because we are civilized. But progressivism tied the second hand behind our back. And the problem is that liberals started to listen to progressives. And then the idea was, once you're faced with a specific kind of challenge, you don't have any answer, or at least they're trying to deprive you from having an answer, and you must capitulate. So the bad guys are much better off, and the good guys have a very major problem. And here is the challenge. You must deal with both parts. When it comes to the military confrontation, you have to inflict on your enemy hardship on a level that even the barbarians cannot sustain. Even the people who don't care about their own population cannot sustain. For instance, to bring destruction to Gaza. Now, you bring destruction to Gaza because you must. Every house is booby-trapped and is a military position. But the outcome, that Gaza is in ruins, is something that even people in Gaza cannot take if you don't let them rebuild their power to fight against you. So you have to militarily show everybody that you can last longer than they do. The assumption is always the good guys can only do fast wars. We are now in a war for 1 year and 2 months, okay? And Israel doesn't want to stop the war. So you have to show that you can outlast them. You have to show that you can ignore the kind of constraints that you cannot afford to have when you're civilized, because otherwise your civilized existence becomes impossible. So first, militarily, you have to be very, very harsh. And on the level of values, you have to completely reject the attempt by progressives through their influence on liberals to prevent you from defending yourself. You must, first of all, identify who your enemy is, and the enemy of Western civilization is progressivism. And by the way, this is something we need to understand in a broader context. The enemy of everything good is too much of something good. For instance, the enemy of nationalism is fascism, namely too much nationalism. And when you have healthy nationalism, and without healthy nationalism, you can't have a broad solidarity, you can't have human rights, you can't have democracy, you must have nationalism. These fantasies of global responsibility, universal solidarity, it doesn't exist, and it exists in universities, not in real life. But the number one enemy of nationalism, in the Second World War, it came out in the most radical way, is fascism. And the fear of becoming fascist undermined people from willing to support nationalism. A very similar thing we have on the other side, where liberals, and Israel must be liberal and national. We call it Jewish and democratic. But this is what it is. We must be a Jewish state, otherwise what's the point? And we must be a liberal state, otherwise we cannot live the way we want to live, in a democracy, in a pluralistic society, in a productive society. So we liberal nationalists must protect ourselves against fascism and progressivism. And by the way, they're twins. They strengthen each other. When dumb people run away from fascism, they go to the extreme of progressivism. And when other dumb people run away from progressivism, they run away from liberalism because of progressivism, they run away in the direction of fascism. We already have it in Europe on a quite considerable scale. So identifying on the value level who our enemies are, and our enemies are those who are saying the good guys cannot defend themselves. The people who have constraints, who want to impose constraints on them, should take the constraints so far that they can no longer defend themselves. So this is the challenge we're having in this new kind of war, because in Gaza we had the most fortified place ever in human history. Because it was fortified not only with rockets and with tunnels and with an underground city, it was also fortified with the BBC and the New York Times and Amnesty International and the courts in The Hague and the United Nations and everybody who was basically saying, you Israelis must let the Gazans kill your children, because otherwise, when you go and kill their terrorists, their children maybe also become a collateral damage. And anyway, you can't fight against people who have a lot of pigments, because if you have a lot of pigments, you must be on the right side of everything. And if you can claim that your grandfather suffered from colonialism, then we are guilty, and you can do whatever you want, and you can be a barbarian, and it's okay because you have enough pigments to be a barbarian. I know it sounds very primitive, but I'm quoting more or less what you hear from some Ivy League universities in America, okay? And by the way, if I had the choice of sending my kid to Gaza or to Harvard, I'm not sure what is more dangerous. Because in Gaza, he can suffer bodily damage, and in Harvard, he may come back analytically underdeveloped and morally twisted and depraved. So no wonder in the demonstrations against Israel, you have both extremes, the anti-Semites and the fascists and the progressives, and they both say queers for Palestine and so on. I mean, it's so ridiculous that unless you're dumb and you twisted every moral fiber in your body, you can't even understand what's going on. So you need to fight in Gaza and to show them that even in Gaza, you can't do it at a cost that you're willing to pay, even if you are a barbarian. Now let's come to the good news. This was the bad news. Now the good news. Israel already won the war. Okay? Maybe we will still have hardships and confrontations with Iran, and Israel will be damaged, and we will have casualties and so on. But we won the war domestically, regionally, and globally. Domestically, look at the resilience of the Israeli people. This is unbelievable. I mean, you would have expected after a year and 2 months, when you have to fight on 7 fronts, and everybody around the world hates you or misunderstands what you're doing or criticizes you, you would have expected Israelis to say, hey, let's stop the war. Basically, what Israeli public opinion is saying, all we are saying is give war a chance. Okay? Don't stop the war. The people in the north say, why did you sign a ceasefire with Lebanon? We are not safe yet. Hit them more. And here is the interesting thing. This unbelievable resilience, the Israeli society is the 8th wonder of the world. This resilience comes without a functioning government. We have the most dysfunctioning government we've ever had. So the society is so strong that even without a well-functioning government, we can take it, and we are willing to take it for longer. So inside, we have already proven that unlike what is happening in the United States, it is not the Israeli society that is in profound, deep trouble. It is only the political system. We have polarization in Israel, but it is a political polarization. It is not a polarization of the people. You have the people who shout in Kaplan, and you have the people who shout in the government, and you have the radicals, and you have the journalists who no longer know what journalism is, and they basically either work for one or work for the other, and you can't take them seriously anymore. But the Israeli society proved a level of resilience that is beyond my most optimistic dreams. So we've already won there. Is it painful? Yes. Will we remember it for a very long time? Yes. But have we learned some important lessons? Yes, very important. So we won there. Regionally, we have the greatest success because the Arabs who want stability in the region now not only consider the possibility of somehow acquiescing with the existence of Israel. They can't do without us. We are so strong and so dependable that they can't do without both the United States and America. America is immeasurably stronger, but Israel is immeasurably more dependable. And the Arabs have learned, these Arabs in Egypt, in Jordan, in Morocco, in Saudi Arabia, in the Gulf, what have you, and countries that did not sign any kind of agreements with Israel, realize that Israel not only can fight, but is fighting against their three worst enemies: Iran, the Muslim Brotherhood, and the unbelievable stupidity of American foreign policy. And the Israelis have proven not only that they can hit the bad guys so badly that the bad guys can't go any further, but also that they managed at the same time, Israel managed at the same time to improve and deepen its relations with the United States and completely ignore what the Americans are suggesting that we should do. Because had we, God forbid, listened to the Americans, we would have been defeated in this war. Everything they suggested concerning Gaza and Lebanon was the wrong thing. The one thing where they were doing a very good job was, first of all, helping Israel defend itself vis-a-vis Iran, very important, and also when they suggested that Israel should restrain its response to Iran, I think they were right, and also they had skin in the game. It could have brought America into the war, and as Israel, you don't draw America into a war that the American people doesn't want to have. So they were right on the Iranian side. But when it comes to Gaza and Lebanon, everything they said was wrong, and had we listened to them, we would have been defeated. It would have been a calamity if we took the Americans seriously. And the combination of improving the relations with the United States and ignoring what they're saying is exactly what the countries in the Gulf want to do. They also understand that you can't trust the Americans, particularly when they believe that if you have radicals, the answer is humanitarian help. I mean, this is what the Biden administration did with the Houthis, taking them down from the terrorist list, giving them humanitarian aid, and putting pressure on Saudi Arabia and the Emiratis to stop the war against them. Because they believe that if somebody wants to kill you, give them humanitarian help. By the way, this was also the dumb approach, and here we had to listen to the Americans because they were obsessed about it concerning humanitarian aid to Gaza. If there is one thing that makes this war longer, is the humanitarian aid that the Americans forced Israel to give in the wrong quantities, from the wrong directions, and so that it will undermine the Israeli position in Gaza and help Hamas. Not because the Americans wish ill for Israel, but just because they misunderstand everything about the Middle East. By the way, this is not true about all Americans. I long for people like Johnson and Nixon and Kissinger, but unfortunately we have people like Eisenhower and Kennedy and Carter and Barack Obama. So it really depends who you have in the United States. Pardon?
Not for long.
Well, let's see what will happen now, but it can't be as bad as Barack Obama. Nothing was as bad as Barack Obama. The profound misunderstanding of everything you can possibly imagine in foreign policy, the worst president the United States had in foreign policy since the Second World War. Biden was a problem. The difference between Obama and Biden is that Obama was for America's enemies and against Americans' allies. And Biden was both 4 American enemies and 4 American allies. So maybe he was less consistent, but he was also less damaging than Barack Obama.
But still damaging.
But yes, but not on Iran. Not on Iran. On Gaza and Lebanon. Not on Iran.
They didn't send us weapons. That prevented us from...
No. The weapons the United States refused to send to Israel did not affect the Israeli-Iranian scene.
No, but the war. It affected the war.
Yes, it affected the war, and they did something, they didn't intend to do it, but the kind of bitter criticism that they had against Israel, and they couldn't say anything positive about Israel without blaming it for undermining human rights. The rest of the world cannot be more pro-American, more pro-Israeli than the Americans. It created an enormous damage, and the obsession is ridiculous. I mean, even now, a few weeks before they leave, they're still trying to apply pressure on Israel when the Israelis don't even take seriously what the this American administration is saying anymore. But I'm still on the regional level. On the regional level, the Arabs will now welcome Israel, not because they love Israel, but because they respect Israel more than ever before. Because what Israel managed to do vis-a-vis Iran, namely to expose the Iranian vulnerability and the fact that we overestimated in a very major way what Iran can do. Because we undermined their worst enemy, because as much of a problem that the Muslim Brothers are for Israel in the Gaza Strip, they are much more of a problem to Egypt or to Jordan or to Morocco or to countries in the Gulf. This is the danger of the Middle East. The calamity of the Middle East is represented in the Muslim Brotherhood. And they understand that this is something you cannot play around with. By the way...
How so? How are they the calamity for Egypt?
First of all, when you had relatively free elections in Egypt, they came to power for 1 year. And then, thank God, we had the military coup of Sisi, because otherwise the Middle East would again see a regional war led by Egypt against Israel. Okay? And it would have brought a calamity to the whole region. No wonder Obama helped it indirectly, both by not helping Mubarak stay in power and then accepting Morsi in Egypt. Again, because he doesn't understand anything about anything.
You're saying the Egyptians know this? And that's why...
The Egyptians know this more than anything else in their life. They know that the number one calamity of Egypt is if the Muslim Brothers take it back to their medieval reality. The ability of countries in the Middle East to meet the challenges of the 20th century, forget the 21st century, the 20th century is challenged by this organization. They know how to pretend to work with you so that they will call themselves, and dumb Americans will call them, people who are actually willing to consider pragmatic. Every radical is also a pragmatic, okay? Hitler was somewhat of a radical. He was pragmatic in Munich, because when he sees that you capitulate, he is pragmatic and he lets you capitulate to him. So this dumb distinction that if you're pragmatic, you're not radical and you're not a danger, this is something that Americans always fall into again and again.
What a lot of people are saying about Jolani now from HTS
Exactly.
in Syria. He's very pragmatic.
Exactly.
But I want to take you back to...
No, but let me just complete the analysis, and then we can go into more specific
Bring
issues.
us home.
So we won regionally because Arab states now seek cooperation with Israel. And by the way, I don't need normalization. I need cooperation. I don't want a legally wedded wife. I want a mistress. Okay? Now, if also this mistress wants to marry, okay. But is it the important thing that they will have peace or have normalization or diplomatic relations? No, the important thing is cooperation, the understanding that they can't do without us because we are the only party in the world that is both strong enough and dependable enough so that they will not face the kind of attitude they faced in America vis-a-vis Iran. By the way, Obama and Biden wanted to capitulate to Iran. Biden learned some lessons about the Houthis, about Iran, about the influence, so he was by far not as bad as Obama. But the Arabs, we won in the region. For the first time, we are in the full sense of the term a regional power. We used to be a regional military power, technological power, economic power, but we were not a political power because we couldn't maneuver between the different Arab states. We now can because they need us, and they know that they need us. And on the global level, I think that people love us much less, but respect us much more. There's a lot of hatred to Jews and to Israel and anti-Semitism and so on. But we are in the beginning of the end of the catastrophic influence that progressives had on liberals. It started in Europe when the progressive convinced liberals and even conservatives to bring in millions of people who would not integrate in Europe, who couldn't integrate, who don't want to integrate, who bring to Europe the inferior culture that destroyed their own countries, and they brought this inferior, and by the way, not different, inferior culture, because if you treat your women like cattle, you're inferior, you're not different. If you're anti-democratic and anti-pluralistic, you're inferior, you're not different, okay? As many pigments as you may have. So, in Europe, there is a major shift in the last decade, too much to the right to my liking, but at least away from progressivism. And everybody understands that if you don't want to promote fascism in Europe, you must control immigration. Immigration is by far the most important issue in the 21st century. So this kind of impact that the progressives had on liberals is exposed. The best piece of theater in the 21st century were the hearings in Congress of the presidents of the three universities. It is exposed. The La La Land reality, this really strange thing that happened is now exposed, first of all, definitely in Europe and also in the United States. Last sentence. Our achievements domestically, regionally, and globally fuel each other. The better off you are in the region, the more you have to be taken seriously internationally. The more you demonstrate the resilience of the Israeli society, the stronger your deterrence in the region. The more you can prove your dependability, the stronger your position in the Arab world. So we are going in the right direction. Did we make mistakes in the war? Yes. Could it be better? Yes. This is true about every successful war. Could we still pay high prices for what we're doing now? Yes. But the trajectory is extremely positive, and I don't expect it to change in terms of the overall trend in the near future.
So, okay, first of all, that was a great analysis, and I'm really tempted to get swept away with your optimism because first of all, I have investments here in Israel, so I'd love for us to have won the war because I think that would be great for the economy, and I would enjoy it. Plus, all the security.
He has a shawarma shop in Fulham.
Yeah. No, but the security. I have a family here. We want to have won the war. But then I look at it and I say, not a single one of our enemies surrendered. We signed a ceasefire with Hezbollah. Gaza is still, Hamas is still fighting. It's not, they still have hostages.
Whole neighborhoods in Gaza we didn't even enter.
They still have hostages. Iran, we had a little bit of a, tete-a-tete, but we didn't really, nothing really happened there. And the Houthis are, I woke up the last 3 nights, because they fired ballistic missiles. And, one of them could have just, thank God it didn't, could have killed me and my entire family and the entire building I was in.
So?
Not so for me. It would have been it would have been a bummer, but it would have ruined my night, But I'm saying, isn't that, how can we say we won the war? If not a single one of our enemies said...
Because there is something wrong with you profoundly, because you're an American.
Okay.
You're
my wife would agree.
You're seeking a solution. And anybody who seeks solutions in the Middle East, I don't know, must have met Obama. Or where are you coming from? This is a dumb approach to the world.
Okay, how come?
Okay? In this region... This is not like the relationship between you and Canada or between the Brits and the Germans, okay? In this region, if people are not afraid of you, you have to be afraid of them. Look at what Arabs do to each other. Take the last century and ask yourself, what do they do to each other? What do you expect? That they will treat you better than they treat their own brothers who speak the same language and have the same religion? They butcher each other all over the place. Okay? You had civil wars in Syria, in Lebanon, in Jordan, in
Gaza,
in Yemen, in Sudan, in Algeria. You live in a region that is extremely violent. Let me perhaps put it in religious terms, because you are speaking about what you believe in or not. Yea, though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for I am the meanest son of a bitch in the valley. Okay? Israel can survive if Arabs are afraid of it. Now, once they're afraid of you, can you cooperate with them? Yes. Once they realize that if they make war, you will break them, can you help them, cooperate with them, speak with them? Yes, yes. And help them as much as you can. But it starts, we have a peace with Egypt. Okay? Now, recently, the president of Egypt, speaking about the 73 war, says to a very large crowd of Egyptian officers and senior people, he says, you Egyptian soldiers are the bravest in the world because you fought in the 73 war. And you fought against the Israelis. Now, we, Egyptians, Arabs, are a Seat, and Israel is a Mercedes. Who even competes with a Mercedes? You did. You're very brave. Now, what is the subtext of that? They are unbelievably strong. We can't afford to make war. Okay? So you have peace. And the only reason Egypt made peace with Israel was that they realized that we will bring ruin on Egypt. And they realized it after the 73 war. And they said it openly. This is what my last book is about. Because when I made this argument, people disagreed with me, so I brought 500 quotations from Egyptian sources to show that this is actually what they have learned from it.
But
in this region, you don't have solutions. By the way, do you have solutions for China? Do you have solutions for North Korea? Do you have solutions for Russia? So the fact that Israel doesn't have solutions for Iran, do you have solutions for Iran? Do you have solutions for the Houthis? You can only do what we've done for more than a century and will be doing for centuries to come. Namely, be strong enough so that if they challenge us, we can deter them for the next time. You space out the wars and you have a kind of maintaining a reality where they cannot hit you too hard, and at the same time you do what we hear about, what Arabs don't do at all, with the exception perhaps of the UAE, and the Saudis may be going in this direction, and I welcome it and I'm delighted. In the Arab world, for the last 100 years, the overwhelming majority of Arabs have built nothing, have done nothing. They continue to exist. And they can't meet the challenges of the 20th century, let alone the 21st century. In Israel, every decade, everything in Israel improves. Now, I know that if you read the Israeli media or you follow the Israeli media, you wouldn't know that this is the best kept secret in Israel. But our life gets better in more than a century, every decade, on every practical field. So the business of Israel is to build a stronger economy, a more advanced medicine, a more sophisticated science, a more pluralistic culture, a more robust democracy. And this is what we're doing, in spite of the fact that from time to time they're trying to kill us. So it's not when will it all end? In Yiddish, was wird sein der Sof? Okay? It's not ending. And by the way, you told me that you're a married person. You still believe in solutions?
Less and less with the years.
Okay. The whole notion of solutions, people who think in terms of solutions should go to crossword puzzles. The only thing in life that has solutions are crossword puzzles.
But still, with our achievements, I'm talking now about Gaza and Lebanon. Those wars seem like a bit of like tantric sex wars, right? It's like tantric sex. I don't know if you're familiar, but
No.
basically, okay, Google it later. But basically, we reached almost to, we almost saw the peak. We almost saw a real achievement. 1 second. And in the last minute, we failed to take the extra mile and to bring it home. For example, in Lebanon, okay, we put Hezbollah to their knees, but we didn't take land at all, which, by the way, is what helped us in 67. It proved useful in 67,
No.
and it was a part of the peace deal with Egypt.
Yes,
Crucial part.
Yes, but you see, taking territory that is unpopulated is great, like the Sinai Peninsula or the Golan Heights. So you can trade the Sinai Peninsula for peace, and that's good because it's unpopulated.
Yeah.
And you can keep the Golan Heights forever because it's unpopulated. Do you want to be stuck in Israel with a Lebanese population?
They all fled.
Huh?
They fled.
Yes, and
It
then,
was empty.
And then you will prevent them from coming back.
Yes.
It is impossible. Look,
Why?
it would have been
We do
great.
it in Gaza.
It would have been great in the 18th century. Even in Gaza, it won't work. Even in Gaza, it won't
is
work.
working.
No, it isn't, because they will come back. Will it take longer? Yes. But will they come back? Yes, because they will not go anywhere else. Okay? They will not go for anywhere else. So this is a very, I'm trying to find a term that is not insulting. Simple-minded, I think, is the idea. You take territory, you bring peace. No. What brought peace with Egypt was not the Sinai Peninsula, but that we broke the ability of Egypt to fight Israel. And Sadat recognized it. No.
Okay.
Because Egypt has a responsible leadership. Namely, they care what will happen to the Egyptian people. And in Lebanon, you don't have a state at all. I mean, Lebanon is like Belgium. It's a misunderstanding rather than a state, okay? The Palestinians have zero responsibility because they know that no matter how barbaric they are, there are enough dumb Americans who will give them billions of dollars for food that they will use for weapons, because they weaponize practically everything, because this is what they're about. They're about killing people, not about building their own society.
So why not changing our approach then?
Our what?
Our approach.
You can't, again, you're seeking a solution. Solutions are not available. You
Not
know
a
what?
solution. I seek to push away the
you-
people who want to kill me.
You can't.
Why?
Not in the 21st century. Again, in the 18th century, it would have worked great. Okay? You can't do it. We couldn't even do it completely in 1948. It was possible when we did not occupy Judea and Samaria in 1948. And even then, both Truman and Kennedy tried to shove the refugees back into Israel. Mm-hmm. But if we would have done it with Judea and Samaria in 1948, we would be in a catastrophic situation where they would have pushed us back to the partition plan borders, and we would have had 45% Arabs in the population of Israel. Today, it is not possible. So stop fantasizing about solutions. We live in an environment that doesn't have solutions. You know what? Since you're Americans, let me quote...
I am not an American. I'm an Israeli born and raised, by the way. And I think many Israelis feel that way. They feel that,
yes,
because they see that
a lot of Israelis are wrong.
Northern Gaza is empty of population.
Yes,
it's a
but
fact.
what's the point?
It has already happened. The question is now, what do you do with this empty piece of land? Do you give it back for free?
You get another piece of land, but you will be loaded with this population because you cannot survive American pressures on it. And this is not the zeitgeist of the 21st century. Again, in the 18th century, you can't. There is a limit to what even Jews can do. You know what? I'll bring you back to the serenity prayer. Remember?
No.
God, give me the serenity to accept what I cannot change, the courage to change what I can and must change, and the wisdom to tell the two apart. I'm the representative of wisdom. And I'm telling you what can and cannot be done. And there will be no solution. By the way, is there a solution to poverty? No. If somebody tells you there is a solution to poverty, he's a communist. In other words, he's trying to cheat you, or he's so dumb that he really believes in it. Is there a solution to crime? No, it's human nature. So, again, when somebody tells you that this is possible, he's either an idiot or he's cheating you. But there is a response. What is the response to poverty? At least the response I favor. It is a welfare state. It brings poverty from an unacceptable level to an acceptable level. A good law enforcement system brings crime from an unacceptable level down to an acceptable level. And I'm looking for responses, not for solutions. And if people are frustrated for not having solutions, they should look at their own lives, see what solutions they have. By the way, what is medicine? There is no solution to the fact that you're going to die. But you say, as long as I live, I want to be as healthy as possible. Okay? But there is no solution. I mean, unless you believe in resurrection.
There's antibiotics. There's antibiotics.
Yes, but antibiotics is not a solution. Antibiotics is a response that helps you keep your short life in better health.
So if we look at Lebanon, are you happy with our response, including this
If I would have been happy, I would not be able to understand the Middle East. If I would seek happiness, look, these great fairy tales, and then they got married and lived happily ever after, written by a bachelor, I'm sure, okay? So, are you happy in your life, in everything you do? No. Do you want to seek happiness, to come close to happiness? Yes. But will you reach it?
So do you come close to happiness with Gaza and Lebanon right now?
Yes. Much, 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 much better than on the 7th of October.
That's
the situation of Israel improved dramatically. And except me, very few people realized that this war is going to end up positively from an Israeli point of view.
So I want to take us to two other topics before we end. One is Iran, and the other we want to talk a bit Trump. But maybe you have some other topics you want to discuss. But how do you see Iran, re-strategizing given the accomplishments that we've achieved?
First of all, Iran was weakened on a number of levels. First of all, the entire structure that they built almost completely crumbled, because Hamas lost 80% of its power, the Hezbollah 60-70% of its power. The Houthis are still waiting to
Syria.
get a good response. They will. The militias in Iraq are not even trying anymore to fight against Israel because they realize what the consequences will be. And here the Americans are on the right side of things. And Iran was exposed as unbelievably vulnerable. And they are vulnerable not only in their air defense systems, but also in their economy. And if Israel acts in Iran, I don't think that we can prevent the nuclear advance that they have. I think militarily it's too late. I mean, Obama did it to us. With the enrichment, where they were the most vulnerable, his policy was too early, too early, too early, too early. Oops, too late, too late, too late, too late. Okay? This is more or less what he did when he capitulated to Iran. Now, if Israel acts in Iran, it must devastate the Iranian economy. And yes, innocent Iranians will suffer. Innocent Germans suffered from the Nazis. Innocent Japanese suffered from the radical fascist regime in Japan. Okay? In wars, innocent people suffer. If you want to have a perfect war, then you will lose it. Okay? So I think their economy should be devastated. They are very, very, very weak, very, very vulnerable. And the important thing is not only that I think that this is the case, but their enemies realized that Iran was weakened. So the Saudis, the Emiratis know that Iran was weakened on all these fronts. And even the Americans now realize that you cannot capitulate. Even the Biden administration, let alone, hopefully, the Trump administration, no longer will try to strengthen Iran on the assumption that if you strengthen a barbarian, he becomes a moderate. Okay? And therefore, I don't think that we have a solution, but our posture is dramatically improved.
But how do you see them responding? Like, what do you see it as plausible that the moderates will regain power? Do you think
there is no such thing as the moderate in this regime?
In Iran,
okay?
There's no moderates in Iran.
In this regime, no.
Not in this regime. In Iran, I'm saying, could there be a
the
toppling
Iranian
of the
society,
Ayatollah?
yes. But not in this regime. I mean, this is like saying the Boston Strangler is a moderate compared to Jack the Ripper. Okay, this is a dumb distinction.
Of course,
and
not.
I don't. And by the way, the so-called pretend moderates are the most dangerous because they make you incapable of dealing with the essence of this regime. Whatever is good for this regime is bad for Western civilization. Okay? So whatever you can do to harm them must be good. It is a zero-sum game.
What would you do
with Iran.
What would you advise the prime minister to do, to the next president to do?
Look, first of all, it depends on the United States. And undermine the Iranian economy more than anything else. Restrictions, sanctions, using the CIA, whatever. Whatever means, whatever is bad for Iran, okay? Isolate Iran. For instance, if I could, I don't think I can, bring Western countries to a point where they don't recognize Iranian passports. Iran is an illegitimate state as long as this regime is in power. I think there are only very few countries that you should treat like that. North Korea and Iran are the most outstanding, where you must say this regime is uncivilized. We don't treat it. We don't let them have embassies. We are not willing to do anything that will let them persist in their position. Okay? And by the way, North Korea is willing to be isolated. Iran is not. So you can put enormous pressure on them. And you should. But again, will that be a solution? We could have this regime toppled And then Iran will change dramatically, because in the Iranian society, there is a very strong element of pluralism that can be mobilized for a very different Iran. I'm very strongly for it.
Sounds like a solution, hopefully.
No, nothing is a solution. By the way,
It's a painkiller.
we may win Iran and lose Turkey. Okay? In Turkey, you have a barbarian that now everybody is trying to cuddle, and he is a Muslim brother. In other words, he can pretend to be pragmatic. And he is more dangerous than people who don't know how to pretend to be pragmatic.
So how do you see Trump's entry changing the landscape, if at all? Are we on a ticking, like, are we on a stopwatch? Like, do we need to complete certain things before Trump enters? Because there was talk about
No. Let me put it this way. It was more important that Kamala Harris will not become president than that Trump will. Okay? Because this was
The end of the world, as we know it.
No, not the end of the world, but she really didn't know one thing from another. I mean, this would have been, it reminded me in this film, The Never-Ending Story, the enemy of Fantasia there is a good thing, is called the Nothing. Okay? This would have been the Nothing. And the fact that the American Jewish community supported Kamala Harris on such a major scale is not testimony for the... I can understand the fears that they had vis-a-vis Trump, and he's a very, very problematic personality. But when it comes to the Middle East, he is responsible for the most important positive change in many years in the Middle East, the Abraham Accords. Now, look at a very interesting thing. Obama got a Nobel Peace Prize for doing nothing. Trump did not get anything for doing the best thing we've had for a very, very, very long time. Okay? So, to the credit of Biden, they wanted to broaden the Abraham Accords, in spite of the fact that they didn't like that it was made in Trump's. To their credit is they wanted to go further than that. They did good work in Saudi Arabia. You must give them credit for it. And again, unlike Obama, Biden was pro-Israel. He really was pro-Israel. The problem is that the Democratic Party listens far too much, and maybe now they will stop listening, to the progressive elements. I think that Israel's bargaining position is improved on such a dramatic level that every American administration must take Israel much more seriously than before, because we are so much stronger regionally that you can't afford not to take us seriously. Let me give you a global perception of that. Should the United States pivot to Asia? Yes. Are American troops helpful in the Middle East in terms of permanent positioning here? No. But when they leave, who will they leave the Middle East to? They can only leave it to a combination of Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. And Israel is an indispensable part of it. So if America wants to deal with China, it depends on being able to leave it to a strong and self-confident Israel in the Middle East, because from all the allies that America has in the Middle East, Israel is the strongest and the most dependable, and the only democratic one. So I think our bargaining position has improved very much.
I have one last question about the hostages. What do you do? We have 100 hostages in Gaza, many of them probably still alive. Not most of them, but many of them. How can Israel bring them back? How do we get them back, if at all?
At the moment, I don't see a way out, because the position of Hamas, I hope the position will change, But the position of Hamas throughout the period was, let us reestablish ourselves in Gaza, and then you can get the hostages.
Maybe.
The problem is that it's not what else can we achieve in Gaza, but will we lose everything we have achieved in Gaza for the hostages? And even then, we will not get all of them. And even then, I don't think we will ever know what happened to some of them. And even then, they will try to hurt us as much as they can. And the very simple-minded approach saying, Bibi doesn't want to release them because he wants the war to be prolonged for his political objectives is, if you want to believe in it, if it makes it easier for you to deal with the terrible grief that I could not even imagine, okay. But does it have any substance to it? Not at all.
So what can you do?
Very little. Very little. Because so far, maybe there is something new that I don't know about. So far, everything I know is that Hamas says, make it possible for me to reestablish myself in Gaza or you don't get the hostages. And certainly not all the hostages. This is not even in the cards. It's not even a possibility.
What about stopping the aid, the humanitarian aid, doing a siege? Would you do one of those things?
I don't think they will let us do it. And even if they do, I don't think Hamas cares if the people in Gaza will starve. Okay? Mm-hmm. The Americans caused enormous damage by forcing Israel to give humanitarian help in the wrong places so that it did not help us to move population so the populations will not be hit when we deal with the terrorists. And also the quantities are enormously more than that can reasonably be expected, so that this is what Hamas is counting on. It's counting on American. They couldn't count on the other American policies because Israel rejected it. With the humanitarian help, the American obsession with it forced Israel to do it. But even if you remove it, Israel can't really starve 2 million people. It's not an option for the Israeli society. And even if they would starve, I don't think they'll give up the hostages.
So there's nothing really we can do more?
I don't see anything now. And these leaks that you constantly have, if we only did this and if we only did that, you can't take it seriously. And unfortunately, most Israeli media are promoting a concept concerning the hostages that I can understand emotionally, but analytically is completely misguided.
Okay. Not an optimistic...
It's a sad note to end on.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, at the beginning of the war, what was different? Just the fact that it was much less, entrenched, and that there was still opportunity to release, because there was a deal at the beginning where over 100 hostages were released. So
yes, but
it was
Hamas realized that from his point of view, he made a mistake, and they're not willing to make this mistake again. I would accept a hostage deal 3 times as bad as the first, okay, from an Israeli point of view. But now the only option is, let Hamas reestablish itself in Gaza, or else no hostages. Okay?
Which is unacceptable.
And you have to see the broader picture, because if they reestablish themselves, you can't bring the people back to the borders of Gaza. If we, for instance, will not be able to have a perimeter where anybody who comes in will be shot, regardless of who he is and what he wants to do, okay? And that we will constantly come into the Gaza Strip again. Look, who
should rule Gaza?
Pardon?
Who should rule Gaza?
Essentially, the Gazans. In other words, let me put it this way. My grandson will fight in Gaza. Okay? We've been doing it for 100 years, and we will be doing it for a very long time to come. Because what they want is to survive like cockroaches. In other words, you can't destroy us, which is true. And they say cockroaches will even survive a nuclear war, okay? But they have not done anything for themselves. They could have turned Gaza. You see, Shimon Peres had this fantasy because he never understood anything about anything. So he had this fantasy that Gaza will turn into Singapore. I told him he must be hard of hearing because somebody said Simgafur and he heard Singapore. But the Gazans don't want to become Singaporeans. They're not a productive people. They are, whatever they have, they will weaponize. They weaponized kites in order to bring bombs into Israel.
And balloons.
They weaponized condoms. Okay, they filled condoms with helium and attached incendiary bombs to them because they want to kill us much more than they want to give their children a better life. So, on the one hand, they're indestructible in the cockroach sense of the term, but on the other hand, what kind of life do they offer? By the way, with the support of the population. Okay? This is not something that a bunch of terrorists came over and took over the innocent, nice Gazans. Okay?
Yeah.
This is a different kind of society. By the way, this was the reason we failed to be prepared for October 7th, because we thought that the people in Gaza are people like us.
Russia.
Are they human beings? Yes. Hitler was a human being. Pol Pot was a human being. But are they in any way similar to what we are? Or what Americans are, or Europeans are, or pluralistic societies are? No, not at all. Not at all. Ask the queers when they really come to Gaza.
Yeah.
They really deserve it. The queers from Gaza
Chicken for
deserve to come to Gaza.
Yes.
I would really give them what they want.
We'll buy you a ticket.
Yeah, whatever.
We'll fly you first class.
Anything.
We'll put you. We'll
Just
kiss you
go
goodbye.
to Gaza. You really deserve it.
Okay.
Wow.
Now we finished on a positive
Yes.
note.
Yeah,
For sure.
absolutely.
Maybe a final joke. Do you have a joke for us before we go? You always have one.
Good
a good
joke.
one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Peace in the Middle East. If that's not a joke, I don't know what a joke is.
Dr. Dan Shiftan, thank you
you.
so much. We really
Thank you very
appreciate it. Guys, thanks. See you next time.
Thanks
Bye.
for tuning in. Bye.